You wake up when the light changes, not when a sound tells you to. There's no alarm, there's no snooze button. Your feet are already dusty from yesterday. You chew on something sour and fibrous you grabbed on the way out of camp, and somebody near you is laughing about a dream they had. Nobody has told you what to do yet. Nobody will. By midday, you've dug up a few roots, cracked open a nut you like better than the others, and argued with your cousin about which direction the animals moved after the rain. Then you sit down, you nap, you talk. Nothing urgent is happening. Now guess how many hours of work fit into that day. The average American logs roughly 34 hours of paid work a week. So why does a hunter-gatherer with no fridge, no store, no delivery app somehow seem less rushed than you? Here's the argument, stated plainly. For most of human history, getting enough food to survive did not take very long. Not 10 hours a day, not 12. In many documented foraging societies, it took somewhere between 2 and 5 hours, most days, to gather or hunt enough to eat. That idea has a name in anthropology. Researchers sometimes call it a picture of built-in sufficiency. The notion that people with very few possessions weren't poor in any meaningful sense because their wants were small and their environment usually met them without a fight. It's not that early humans had everything, it's that they didn't need much, and what they needed didn't cost them their whole day. That single reframing changes how we should think about the entire idea of work, the martu, and what a GPS tracker actually shows. Start in the western desert of Australia, one of the driest, harshest places people have ever chosen to live. The martu, an Aboriginal group who still forage there today, have been studied closely by anthropologists Rebecca Bleach-Bird and Douglas Bird, who did something clever. Instead of just asking people how long they spent hunting, they strapped GPS units and activity trackers onto foragers and measured it directly. What they found didn't look like grinding labor. Women digging for goanna lizards or bush onions moved in bursts. Dig, rest, talk, dig again. And total foraging time on a given day was often just a few hours, layered with plenty of standing around, teaching kids, and social visiting. The work was real, but it wasn't constant, and it wasn't lonely. It was closer to a shared outdoor errand than a shift. Move to the forests of eastern Paraguay. In the 1980s, researchers Kim Hill and Magdalena Hurtado spent years living alongside the Ache, timing almost everything: walking, hunting, resting, snacking mid-hunt. Their data showed Ache men, even on hunting days, spent a surprisingly small slice of daylight hours actually pursuing game. A lot of the day went to travel, to processing what they'd found, and to rest breaks that would look, to modernize, suspiciously like slacking off. The Ache data mattered because it wasn't guesswork. It was minute-by-minute observation, repeated across seasons, and it kept landing on the same conclusion other foraging studies were reaching. Subsistence work, even in a dense tropical forest with real risk involved, didn't swallow the whole day. One more thread, and it's not about food at all. At Blombos Cave on the South African coast, archaeologists led by Christopher Henshelwood uncovered a toolkit roughly 70,000 years old, built for a single purpose: grinding and mixing red ochre pigment. Shells were used as mixing containers. Bone tools were used as applicators. None of it fed anyone. Think about what that implies. A group of people had enough spare time and enough spare attention to develop a whole workflow around making paint. That's not a species pinned down by hunger. That's a species with room left over in the day, room it chose to spend on color, decoration, and probably status or ritual. You don't invent a pigment processing station when you're starving. Let's build one ordinary day, start to finish, based loosely on patterns anthropologists have documented across several foraging groups. No single culture matches this exactly. Think of it as a composite, a plausible stitch together of what the data suggests a day could feel like. Sunrise. People wake up scattered, not together. Some are already up, quietly repairing a cord or sharpening a digging stick by feel in the low light. There's no starting bell. Mid-morning, a small group heads out, maybe 4 or 5 people, not the whole camp. They're not marching, they're wandering with intent, checking the ground for signs, stopping to pull up a root here, catch sight of a lizard track there. Conversation drifts in and out. Somebody tells a story about a hunt from 3 years ago. Nobody hushes them for it. By late morning, a share of the food for the day has already been collected. It's not enough to stop entirely, but it's enough to slow down. There's a stretch where people rest in whatever shade exists, chew on something, doze if they feel like it. Early afternoon brings the heaviest stretch of activity. Maybe a short hunt, maybe deeper digging, maybe hauling water from a source a mile off. This part takes real effort, real sweat. It might run 2 hours. It might run 1. By mid-afternoon, most of the physical work for the day is done. What follows is long and unhurried. Processing what was gathered, cracking shells, scraping hides, weaving fiber into cord. Tasks that are physical but social, done in a loose circle, hands busy while mouths are busier. Children drift in and out of this circle, half helping, half playing, absorbing skills without anyone formally teaching them. As the light goes gold, food gets shared out, and this matters because in most foraging societies, what one person or family gathers doesn't stay only with them. It moves around camp, person to person, in a web of obligation and reciprocity that means nobody eats alone while somebody nearby eats nothing. Night brings fire, noise, arguments, jokes, maybe a dance, maybe a long silence while someone stares at the coals. There's no clock counting down to tomorrow's shift. Tomorrow will arrive the same way today did, unscheduled and probably not that demanding either. So if the old way worked, why did almost everyone eventually leave it behind? The honest answer is, farming didn't win because it made life easier. It won because it made life more crowded. And once it did, there was no clean way back. A single planted field could feed far more mouths than the same patch of wildland ever could through foraging alone. That meant farming populations simply out-multiplied foraging ones, generation after generation, until farming groups surrounded and eventually absorbed or displaced their foraging neighbors almost everywhere on Earth. It wasn't usually a peaceful upgrade people chose because it sounded nice. It was closer to a one-way ratchet. Once your neighbors had committed to fields and stored grain, and their numbers had grown to match, going back to a smaller, mobile foraging life stopped being a realistic option, even if it had once been the better one. And once people were tied to fields, they were tied to something new, too. A fixed piece of land that had to be defended, taxed, and eventually owned. That's the seed of the job. So the next time you're sitting in a meeting that could have been an email, or scrolling through a to-do list at 11 at night, it's worth remembering that the 8, 9, 10-hour day isn't some ancient default setting for our species. It's a relatively recent arrangement, built on top of stored grain, fenced land, and clocks that didn't exist for most of the time humans have been around. Picture it like this. Somewhere in the Kalahari, or the Western Desert, or the Paraguayan forest, right now, someone is sitting in the shade with dirt still under their fingernails from a root they pulled an hour ago, and they are, for all practical purposes, done working for the day. Not because they got lucky, because that's roughly how much the day required. You, meanwhile, are probably still got 20 minutes left on this video and 40 emails left in your inbox. Sit with that gap for a second before you close the tab.